Rod Bailey. Rod is our country guy expert. He's a country living expert. He is a professional farmer as well. And he's been giving us a very comprehensive guide on how to move to the country so that if you or your family are contemplating moving to the country or perhaps retiring the country, purchasing a property in the country, there's a lot of things to consider. It's not a trivial thing. And the better prepared you are, the better are your chances to really enjoy this decision. So, Rod, good morning to you. Thank you so much for joining us this morning.
Good morning, Joseph.
It's great to have you here. My friend, Happy New Year to you. How was the new year in your property? Did you stay put? Did you stay at home or did you go somewhere? Tell us a little bit about what happened to you.
Yeah, market gardening isn't a business that you can walk away from for any period of time. And this spring and summer have been very dry here, which is a blessing in so many ways, but it also means that we need to be on ground every day to irrigate our plants. Summer's our busiest time, and especially when it's dry, we need to keep up with the irrigation. And the opportunity for us to take a break comes in wintertime with everything's going so slower and the climate's so much more conducive to plants looking after themselves.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. So, Rod, last time we were starting to talk about some of the fixed factors of the property, the things that you cannot change. So you're talking about location, aspect, topography, size, zoning, etc. Where do we continue from that conversation? Because that was a very interesting one.
Yeah, so far we've looked at the factors like the climate, that goes along with the general geographical area, the water that's available, which is so important for agriculture and life in general, the location, how far it is to town, the convenience of it. We talked about the aspect. And this concept of topography is really important. Topography just really means that the lay of the land. And in many ways, the lay of the land determines the potential. If a property is very, very steep, it means the access is difficult. It means, agriculture is a challenge. Walking up and down hills sometimes becomes a challenge. So there's a gradient from very steep country all the way through gentle slopes, gentle grades, through to perfectly flat country sort of thing. And so there's a practical aspect. Is the topography of the land going to suit what I want to do on the land? And secondly, there's a personal preference. A bunch of our kids, we've got 6 kids, and every time we go out west or out into the desert of Central Australia, the kids are going, "Oh, we love this flat country."
Yeah.
Whereas I'm a forest sort of a person, and I love seeing undulating country. And if we're choosing somewhere to live permanently, maybe that's something that's really important for us to consider.
Absolutely. Yeah, these are some really, really good points here to consider. Me too. I do enjoy mountains and hill country, but at the same time, as you mentioned, agriculture can be a pretty big challenge if you don't have a nice flat area.
It's true. And then there's other aspects like is the country a swamp? Is it just so low-lying and flat that a lot of the country is covered by water a lot of the time? Or is it a river flat, which is beautiful for agriculture most often, but also could be susceptible to flooding during high rainfall events? And then there's aspects like lowland around swamps can often mean lots of mosquitoes or fog or mist hanging around a lot of the time, or maybe the cold air from the surrounding country is going to flow into it, so it stays cold, particularly for a long time on winter mornings. And whereas elevated land, you can get up out of the mist. Into the air, you can catch the breezes better, et cetera, et cetera. So there's a lot of things to consider there.
Okay, no, that's good to know. And look, it's interesting that you mentioned that. I remember one time, just looking at the market, seeing what kind of properties were there, and some of these, flat plains that were bordering rivers. I noticed that they had a very attractive price. But then asking why is the question? So, because you're going to get floodings every year from that river.
Yeah, I once looked at a 100-acre property, and 2 acres of it wasn't flood prone.
Wow!
So
Imagine that.
2% of the 2% of the property wasn't going to be flooded every year, every 2 or 3 years. So, yeah, that may be okay for your purpose. Maybe you only need 2 acres for a house and, you know, a little bit of a garden and orchard for your family. But it's really something worth considering.
Absolutely. All right. So where do we go next?
So size, you can't really change the size of a property. And so we really need to work out the sort of lifestyle we're wanting to live, to work out how much land we want, and also what we might need. You know, we all need, if we're moving to the country, we don't want our gutters of our houses to be touching the neighbours sort of thing. So we're looking when we go to the country for space and for freedom. Maybe we don't even want to see our neighbour's house. Maybe we don't want to hear their loud music on a Friday night or hear their kids riding their mini bikes around. You know, we're all got different needs. But so in a sense, we want a property as big as we can possibly afford, because obviously size of property usually, to some degree at least, determines the value or the cost of the property. But we've got to remember that more land means more problems, in the sense we're responsible for our land, okay? And the larger the land that we have, unless it's just bush, which can, you know, look after itself, it's been doing it for thousands of years. But we've just got to remember that the larger the property, the more responsibility we have. You know, if we've got 2 acres, that's a very small boundary perimeter fence that we need to maintain. But if we've got 200 acres, that's vastly more length of fence that we need to maintain. If the house is, if the property is 100 acres and the house is, you know, 40 metres from the road, that's a relatively short driveway that we need to maintain. But if it's 2 kilometres from the road, that's a very long driveway we need to maintain. So my gut feeling is, when we're coming to choosing a property, we need to work out what we want and what we need, and not just go crazy on thinking, let's buy 1,000 acres, when 20 acres might suit us better and save us a lot of heartache down the track.
Yes, no, I hear you. That's a really good requirement. It's about trying to find that sweet spot, isn't it? When it comes to you know, really, really big properties, and one thing that I think about is mowing the lawns. How do people do it? Like, do you have to buy one of these, you know, massive ride-on mowers? People are using robot mowers, or if you threw in a couple of sheep and, you know, some grazing animals, they will take care of that for you.
Yeah, look, it completely is determined by your context. You know, as Australians, we love a big lawn. We really do. We've got this love for grass and lawn, and, you know, we want to get out there and play cricket or football or whatever on our lawn sort of thing. But you're right, the bigger the lawn, the more expensive the machine you need to maintain it, and the more time you need. And some people love sitting on a lawnmower if they've got the privilege of sitting on one, you know, and maybe they're willing to put half a day a week into during summer, well, here in summer when the grass is really growing. But you've got your hand mowers, your push mowers, you've got your self-driving mowers, you've got your ride-on mowers, your zero turns, then you get to little tractors with mower decks, and then you have larger tractors with slashers or mulches on the back sort of thing. But it's the same principle, Joseph. You're exactly right. The bigger the lawn, the more effort you've got to maintain. You know, and with regards to using animals, perfect. You probably don't want them immediately around your house, you know, because domestic animals, they come to think in some way that they're human, whether they're sheep or calves or goats. They want to be living with you. They'll be on your veranda and in the house if you've got the door open. So you need fencing to keep them out. But like that zone that's not immediately around your house, you could definitely have grazing animals. once again, you've got fencing you need to manage there. Sometimes in some locations, their manure can attract flies. So maybe the fly population will be larger than you like because you've got animals close. But that's definitely an option.
Yeah.
And
what about zoning? Because I remember seeing another property not far from where I was, and it was like a beautiful property. It was perfect, it was flat. But then they said this could only be used as a hobby farm, and you could not live there. So
right. Okay.
So what's the zoning story?
This is something that is very difficult to change. Zoning just means each local council or local government determines what each piece of land is allowed to be used for. And, so in our valley here, we've got rural prime agriculture, we've got rural second class, we've got rural third class. And but the thing you're interested in mostly there in your question is what's called housing entitlement. And this is the most important thing to ask a real estate agent when you're looking at rural property that doesn't already have a house on it. And sometimes, even if it does, you must ask the question, does this property have a housing entitlement? Okay, because there's a lot of rural land, you can use it for all sorts of things, but you're not allowed legally to build a dwelling upon it. Mm-hmm. And so some houses in rural country areas have been built without a housing entitlement. That means there's no legal standing for that house to be there, and you are at risk of council finding out about it and coming along and saying, you know what, this house isn't allowed to be here, sort of thing. And so therefore the value of your asset and your opportunity to live there crashes and burns like that. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Very, very important question. If you're looking at rural property, and it's suspiciously cheap, that may be the reason why. Some people I know are taking the risk of buying properties without housing entitlements and building houses, or continuing to live in existing houses that don't have housing entitlement, but it is a great risk.
But in these properties, for example, is it more like you cannot build a house with foundations and everything, but for example, if a person has a caravan, they want to bring their caravan and live there, is that something that they could do in these arrangements? Or
in most states and in most local government areas, there's a time restriction on how much you're allowed to dwell there. Like in I think the legislation's still the same. In New South Wales, where we are, you're allowed to live in a caravan or a tiny home or something like that on a property without a housing entitlement for a maximum of 2 nights per week.
Okay.
I think it is. So this is what they're generously allowing. Okay, this can be a weekender. You can go and camp there on weekends, but you can't live there permanently. Mm-hmm. But this does change from state to state, and it does change from local government area to local government area. So that's a vital question to ask. Am I allowed to live here temporarily without a dwelling entitlement? What are the restrictions? Yeah, and
good.
A lot of people take no notice of the restrictions, and they just go and do what they want to do anyway. And, that's their choice. But once again, it's a risk you take.
It's a risk that you're taking. Absolutely.
Yeah.
So, Rod, we have about a minute left in this segment for today. We've been talking about zoning. We have been talking about the topography of the land as being very, very important aspects to consider. What is some of your final words, and where are you going to take us next?
Okay. One thing I want to say about zoning is it's very important to get the council document that determines what your zone is, because it has prohibited uses listed and allowable uses with council approval. Okay. And so if you're thinking of doing a business or having cabins or, whatever else, it's really important you look at the restrictions in that zoning document. Very, very important. I can't emphasize it enough.
Right.
And so the next thing we want to talk about is the soil, vegetation, the wildlife that might be there that can be a pro or con, historic use of the property, what it's been used for before, and if that'll affect your planned life and things like that. So we'll just continue on these list of things that we can't change about a property that's so important for us to be aware of before we make a decision to purchase it.
Can't wait for that one. Rod Bailey, thank you so much for joining us today and for helping us to complete our guide on how to move to the country, the things to consider, and to explore that lifestyle, which has so many amazing benefits. Thank you very much. We're looking forward to talk to you again next time.